Number 1. It was the summer of my 10th grade year. Hormones were high. Stress was even higher. Boys, homework, and the internet, that's what my life basically consisted of. When summer finally rolled around, I seized the chance I had when both my parents were at work. Brother was in summer reading school. I threw on a light jacket, some hiking boots, and set out for the woods at the end of my street. To give some background, the woods aren't very big, maybe a half-mile thick with a river between each shore, 5 miles in length. That was my safe haven, and I was always calm when I was there. Except this time. I wish I hadn't gone. I didn't really have a set destination, so I just started walking down the path. I had gone maybe a mile when I heard footsteps behind me. Naturally, I turned around, only to see 3 burly guys with 2 dogs. I shrugged this off, shot them a smile, and got off the trail so they could pass me. Dog walkers weren't really any cause for alarm, so I headed down a handmade trail towards a small fort a few of the neighborhood kids had built. I was walking around the structure and spent about 20 minutes just enjoying the sunshine and the silence. I heard branches snapping and turned, hoping it was maybe a deer, but instead I see the same guys picking their way through the woods from behind me. Mind you, I was staring at the fort, and these guys had taken another path. I watched them for a moment, wondering if maybe they were teaching their dogs something. Again, it wouldn't be the first time. Instead, they were staring directly at me. I got up and grabbed my jacket and headed back towards the main path, a red flag going up as I turned to see the 3 guys walking after me. I turned onto the path and took a deep breath. I started at a slow jog. I wanted to get to the place I knew I could hide. I couldn't go home. They were blocking the path towards my house. I heard them reach the path, and then raised voices and pounding feet. I picked up my pace until I was sprinting down the path. I took a sharp turn and slid down a steep incline and sprinted into a place me and my friends used to call the Dunes. It was a sand pit bordering the river. I could hear them cursing and howling as they struggled to get down the incline, their dogs growling, and a thought from who knows where came to mind that if I hid, they could always set their dogs on me, and I'd be helpless to protect myself. I turned to my next option, a thick tree that had bridged the river. There was no way they could possibly get their dogs across that. I made a mad dash towards the tree before freezing, weighing my options in a vain hope that they hadn't followed me. They did. I scrambled up onto the tree and began crawling towards the other shore. I heard shouting, and I turned to see the guys still trying to get their dogs up onto the log. I landed on the shore and spun, breathing hard. They were shouting curse words at me, and one even threatened to kill me. In my stupidity, I had forgotten my cell phone at home, and I inwardly cursed. Soon, the guys left with their dogs, and I stayed there until dark, just to make sure they were gone. I don't know what I had done to them for them to do what they did, and I'm thankful that I knew the paths well enough to save my own life. Number 2. This happened to me back in 2008 when I was 16 years old. I feel like I just managed to escape a dangerous situation. I had just turned 16, which is kind of a big deal, and instead of being at home celebrating with my friends, I was stuck in a town hundreds of kilometers away from them. It is a beautiful, vibrant town. I just didn't know anyone there, except for Dave. He was 21 years old and I really didn't know him well. I had met him once when he was visiting my hometown. But I was lonely, and as a 16-year-old, spending your birthday alone is literally the worst thing. So I was desperate to have some fun. Dave invited me to go to an overnight trance festival with him and his friends. At first, my mom was completely against the idea, but Dave agreed to meet up with my family, and I pretended to know him a lot better than I really did. He was a very mild-mannered and charming boy, and this, coupled with the fact that my mom felt bad for my 16th birthday being so lousy, was enough to convince my mom to let me go. I was so excited. I was going to my first festival, and with older guys. It was going to be the best birthday ever. The festival was being held in the middle of a wooded area about an hour's drive away from where I was staying with my parents. This will be relevant later. I had never met Dave's friends, but they seemed okay. The one guy that made me feel a little uncomfortable, he kept on looking at me like I was food. We will call him Mike, because I don't remember his name. I wasn't going to let that ruin my evening, though. The night started with us smoking some weed, which I was no stranger to. Then they convinced me to snort some MDMA. It was my first time, but I was no stranger to drugs, so I obliged. We then went to the dance floor, and I had a blast. I was way too high to care about anything but the music and the way it felt to move my body. I started feeling a little overwhelmed, being in the thick of it, so I moved off to the side where I could still hear and dance to the music, but be a bit more chilled. I slowly became aware of a conversation taking place behind me. The voice was saying odd things.
See that girl? She's one of my girls. She knows how to treat you right. Just see how well she moves.
She does look good.
The first man then goes on to describe all the things his girl can do. Some pretty intense sexual things. I was like, man, this girl sounds hardcore. I even looked around to try and spot her. There were a couple of ladies nearby, but I had no idea of knowing which one it was, so I just carried on dancing. After a while, the first man encouraged the other to go and dance with this girl, and she would give him
a taste of what she can do.
And to my surprise, this man comes and tries to start dancing with me. I stopped dead, looked at him, and then turned around to see who was calling me his girl, and there's Mike standing and leering at me. I'm standing there in shock when Dave rushes over, whispers we have to go, and pulls me off the dance floor. I go with him, thinking of him as my savior, and he takes me over to some jungle gyms overlooking the festival. I managed to find a comfortable corner of the jungle gym and was just enjoying the evening air, the fire dancers and the distant dance floor, when I spot Mike fairly close by in an animated conversation with the guy from earlier. The guy finally hands over some money, and I was just puzzling this over when Dave and his friends come over to the place I was happily ensconced. They surround me and offer me a line of something. I ask what it is, but they won't tell me, so I decline. There are 4 of them standing very, very close to me, completely trapping me as I have a pole at my back. One is shining a torch in my face, and they will just not take no as an answer. They badger me for what felt like 10 minutes before I finally gave in. As soon as I had taken the line, Dave says we should head to the car. I was already way too suspicious to ever want to go to the car, so I asked if I could just go and dance real quick, and then I'd go with them. I ran off to the dance floor, pretending to be excited to get dancing, and pushed my way right into the thick of the crowd. From there, I worked my way to the front and then slipped into the surrounding woods. I hid behind the closest tent and tried to plan out what to do next, when my phone blew up with texts and calls from them asking where I was. I had literally been gone for like 2 minutes. Why were they so worried? I began moving stealthily from one tent to the next, hiding behind trees and being extremely paranoid. As I was switching hiding places, I heard 2 guys approaching, so I dove into some bushes. I had no idea who they were, and I was about to ask them to help me when I heard the one describing my exact outfit and description to the other. I was so scared. I had never seen those 2 amongst the group I was with. How did they know who I was, and why were they looking for me? I just had no idea what to do. I was scared that if I phoned my mom, I would get into huge trouble, and who knew how long it would take her to get there? I had no idea who to trust and no plan. I just continued moving through the woods, feeling hopeless and terrified, when I spotted a campfire. I ran towards it, and when I emerged, there was a group of about 15 very high-looking hippies jamming music and having a good time. So I sat with them. They welcomed me warmly and let me sit with them for the remainder of the night. I didn't tell them what was going on. I wasn't sure if I believed it myself. After a few hours, Dave finally found me and tried to get me to leave with him. I refused, so he just sat there until sunrise. I then called my mom to come and fetch me. I didn't want to call her at an ungodly hour. I went home, and I never spoke to Dave again. For those of you wondering why I didn't report them, I wish I had. Unfortunately, I'd been let down by adults before this, and mostly just blamed myself for what happened. Number 3. Despite a few creepy instances as a child, there has only been one time in my adult life that I have truly felt primal fear. I live in a village in the middle of the English countryside. To paint an accurate picture of its size, it has a population of 4,000, but feels more like 1,000 due to its spread out nature and being surrounded on all sides by lots of fields, farms, and woods that eventually connects onto a pretty famous forest. It's kinda in the middle of nowhere, and because of this, has notoriously bad phone and internet connections. Having lived here all my life, I know the place like the back of my hand. I know where all the public footpaths through the woods, fields are, where they connect, which are shortcuts, where to cross deep streams, etc. I have gone on walks in this area throughout my childhood with parents and alone as an adult. Nothing bad had happened. I felt safe here. This story takes place last summer in July, after I moved back home from university, had yet to get a job, and smoked a lot of weed. A habit my parents despised, and which I tried to keep hidden from them by going for evening walks, multiple pre-rolled joints hidden away in my hoodie pocket. As usual, this day they both got home at 5 p.m. We had dinner, but chatted for a while longer than usual, as my mom had had quite a hectic day and was telling me about it. Because of this, I ended up heading out for my walk an hour later than routine, around 7 p.m. But as it was summer, the sun was still shining, so honestly, I didn't really notice that it would start getting dark while I was still out. The woodland closest to my house is less than 5 minutes away, and you enter through a gate into a farmer's field. You can see across the open area quite far until the first set of small woods obscures your view. That's where I was heading, as I knew this track takes under 2 hours and leads back onto the same path I was standing on now. More than enough time to smoke the 3 joints in my pocket and for the smell to leave my clothing, I had thought. This entire area is very popular for dog walkers, so it's not unusual to see other people while you are about, and as this is a village, everyone says hello to everybody. I lit my first joint and started walking. I'm just in my own world for a while until I was less than 100 feet before the entrance to the woods. An elderly man was coming out of them, throwing a ball for his collie dog. I finished my joint and stubbed it out. As I got closer, I recognized it was John, who lived on the road next to mine and knew my grandpa. We stopped and said hello, and I stroked his dog Max. While talking, I see another man coming out of the woods. No dog, bright green jacket, very tall, and had a good 10 years on me age-wise. Me and John chat another minute and say goodbye. He warns me not to stay out there too long, as it will start getting dark soon. True, the sky was bright pink and orange. The sun was indeed beginning to set. I hadn't really noticed. I continued on down the path towards the man. When we were nearly passing each other, I look up to make brief eye contact, smile, and say hello, like everyone here does, even if you don't recognize the person. My eyes instantly met his. He was already looking at me. His dark eyes locked on mine. He wasn't smiling. I didn't know him at all, but I knew something was wrong. It was in his eyes. I swallowed my politeness and looked at the ground as we passed. I had lived in my uni city the past couple years, so I knew a red flag when I saw one, and my country bumpkin manners evaporated. I quickened my pace a little, and before entering the woods, slyly looked back. The guy was still walking in the same direction, following John. I felt relieved, laughed, cursed the weed for making me paranoid while lighting up another joint, and started walking into the woods. It takes about 30 minutes to follow the path through the woods to the end. The pathway exit opened into another field that led to another set of woods. The sky was now violet, the dimming light having been obscured to me by the trees. I was already smoking my last joint and was near the entrance to the second set of woods when I felt it. Fear. Complete, crippling, absolute fear worked its way like electricity through every layer of flesh. I'd never felt anything like it before or since, but I knew what it was. I whipped around. Standing at the exit of the first set of woods was the man. I could still make out his green jacket in the fading light. He's fucking doubled back. And very quickly, too. I had looked back several times while in those trees, and he hadn't been there. For a second I froze, as he did. He knew I'd seen. To sprint the distance between us would take him about 5 minutes. He was obviously in good shape. I threw the spliff and bolted into the woods. The only way I could go. I didn't dare look behind me. I sprinted for a couple minutes before taking a sharp left turn off the path into the trees, hoping to throw him off a bit, but I couldn't see a thing. The light was already darkening, and the trees made it 100 times worse, especially as I was now in the thick of them. Their branches catching on my clothes like fingers, whipping and scratching my bare legs so bad I bled. I ran and ran, my lungs protesting in pain, hating me for smoking so much, while my heart was throwing itself against my ribcage, trying to escape. I couldn't any more. I threw myself on the ground behind a particularly thick trunk, my back against it, knees to my chest, had thrown over my mouth to stifle my labored breathing, desperately trying to pump air into my lungs for the next sprint. I listened for the first time. A few seconds passed silently. Then I hear him. Heavy footfall snapping twigs behind me and about 20 feet to my left. I dare not look in case he sees me. I have my phone, but know I have little chance of signal being where I was, and knew he'd either hear me talking or see the light from the display. I'm not ashamed to say at this point, I start to cry. The tears falling silently down my cheeks.
What the fuck?
I hear a deep voice exclaim.
Where are you? I know you're here. I saw you.
I have to clasp both hands across my mouth to stop my scream escaping. I can hear him moving around. I panic and I find enough courage to slowly peek from behind the tree. He was about 10 feet behind me, less than 20 feet to the left, with his back to me. I moved back and my eyes searched the area around me. I pick up a pretty heavy rock. I carefully check on him again. His back is still turned, but he's searching through the trees, hunched down lower to the ground now. I make a snap decision, and with everything I had left, I threw the rock behind me and to the right. It clattered through the branches of the trees and made one hell of a noise. I watched him immediately bolt in its direction. Laughing. He fucking laughed. I paused a little, hearing his footsteps get quieter, until I thought I wouldn't be so visible to him if I moved, and threw myself forward. I ran, trying to put as much distance between us as possible, but I was also aware that I was getting further and further away from home. I knew there had to be a stream somewhere close. If I found the stream, I could follow it as it borders the land and ran parallel to some of the footpaths. I ran until the trees finally cleared and I can just make out another field through them on the other side. I thank God and push myself a little further till I'm out of the trees and the ground disappears from below my feet and I go head over shoulders down the stream embankment. I crash into the water below, my open mouth and lungs filling with muddy water. As I splutter it out, I feel both relieved to have found the stream and terrified he's heard me. My phone is now ruined. I slowly make my way downstream as quiet as possible, listening out for him the whole time as the stream borders the woods, looking up periodically just in case. After a while, maybe half an hour, I noticed the trees begin to thin out and realized this is the edge of the woods where I would have been exiting and where the path connected to the original one I'd started on. If I ran, I could get home in less than 20 minutes. As quiet as I could, I dragged myself on my stomach back up the embankment army style, wanting to stay as low as possible. I peeked over the top. I could just make out the opening of the woods exit path about 50 feet away. I sat and scanned the forest line for a couple minutes, my eyes trying to make out movement despite it now being pitch black. Nothing. I couldn't hear anything either. I pushed myself up and sprinted as fast as I could across the field onto the pathway. I knew the gate I'd entered through was in the adjoining field. It wasn't far. I was so happy.
You're a fucking bitch!
Came a screech from across the field. I swear my legs nearly gave out then and there. He had been waiting for me. I turned my head and saw him sprinting out of the woods at full pelt. I screamed and pushed myself further, tears coating my face. All I could do is run. I crossed into the main field now, and I could see the moonlight shining off the metal gate. My house was just 5 minutes away after that. I have never focused on anything as much as that gate. He was faster than me and getting closer, screaming at me the whole time about how he was going to slit my throat. I ran and ran, pushing myself up and over the gate and ran up the road. I dared look as I made the turn for my road. He was still fucking following me. I raced up my driveway and threw myself through the door, running into the living room, crying and screaming hysterically, pointing behind me towards the door. My dad ran outside while my mom grabbed a hold of me as I collapsed, shaking. As it turns out, my parents had already called the police. As I said, I was going out for an hour at 7, and it was now past 12 a.m., and I hadn't answered when they had called my now broken phone. Very unlike me. We called the police again to explain. They came, and I gave a full statement. Both my parents and the police were horrified. Nothing like this happens here. There hasn't been a reported rape or murder in the last 100 years. But one look at me, and it was obvious I was telling the truth. I was covered head to toe in cuts and bruises, soaking wet and covered in mud and blood. I won't go into how this experience changed me. It's depressing. But I will say the thing that scares me the most is that they never even had a suspect. Despite him following me so closely, he was gone by the time my dad ran outside. That guy is still out there, and who knows what he is really capable of. Creepy Mina here of the Worst Nightmare channel. These were 3 very terrifying stories of women being chased and pursued by predators in the forest or the woods. I hope you all realize that when I do these videos, it is to help women to get tips and ideas on how to protect themselves, things they should do and things they shouldn't do. So I hope you will take notes as you go along, mental notes anyway, of all the different things that these ladies managed to do to save themselves. I do want to apologize. This video got out a little bit later. I usually upload on Saturday nights, but there was a car accident of a family member of my family, and so I had to help out with that yesterday, so that kind of delayed production, so to speak. So I do want to take a moment right now to thank all my subscribers. I have reached, unless it's gone down, which it can happen, 101 subscribers, and I'm very happy and grateful for that. And I want to take a moment to thank the original posters, because most of my material does come from the Let's Not Meet subreddit, and I'd like to thank all those ladies who have agreed to let me tell their stories so that more people can hear of them and hopefully learn from them. So you know the drill. Comment below, give me a thumbs up, share on your favorite social networking platform, subscribe if you haven't already, follow me on Twitter for advance notice of all uploaded videos, and always remember to stay safe.